So good morning from my side as well. You will notice I'm not a native speaker, so I'm German by birth, and this could be also an issue because I have this strong accent. So tell me if you understand me, and if I talk too fast, I'm happy to also adapt speed. My idea for the next roughly 45 or 60 minutes I have with you is to give you an overview. What are the key trends that we see in terms of digital health at this point in time as GE Healthcare around the globe, but with a focus also on this region of the world. Secondly, I want to give you 4 tangible examples where we are using digital technologies as we speak to improve patient outcomes. And then I want to show a little bit how we in GE Healthcare think about innovation and doing this together with our partners. And to close, I'm happy to answer any kind of questions you have. Having said this should not be me just pushing content towards you. I really want to engage into a discussion, so feel free to not just stop me if I talk too fast, but also to ask questions and share your thoughts. And I'd like to start with a thought-provoking question to all of you. Is the way how we deliver healthcare today sustainable? I see some people shaking their heads. No. Why? Why do you guys think no?
Well, aging population, budgets for healthcare not keeping track with the demand for healthcare. That's the large one. And then you've got the UK. You have a UK element to that, which is political will.
As well, yeah, good one.
Spend enough money to spend comparable with Germany,
yeah.
Or not.
Under investment for the last years. I mean, I just to prepare for that, I saw an article from Financial Times that said that basically there's an underinvestment in terms of hospital beds. I think there's just one country in Europe which has less hospital beds per 1,000 inhabitants, and it's 3 times less than the Germanys, the Switzerlands, and the Polands, to make a comparison. But these are all good reasons. I'd like to give you some figures that are, for me, always giving me a purpose why I do what I do every day. By today, 3.8 billion people have no access to basic healthcare services around the globe. That's a little bit less than half of the population. There are more people that have access to a smartphone than to healthcare. And this could be a solution in the past, by the way, in the future, by the way, because a smartphone can be access to healthcare. If you see across the OECD countries, 20% of healthcare spending is wasteful. So if I invest 120 pounds or 100 pounds into my healthcare, 20 goes directly somewhere to the bin. We are a highly inefficient sector. Medical errors around the globe are said to be the 3rd reason of death. I mean, think about that. Medical errors are the 3rd reason of death. And this doesn't depend where you are in the world. It's the same in Germany as in Spain. It's not even aligned with the quality is not even aligned to the income level of countries. It depends sometimes by care areas. Today we miss 8 million, last time I checked, healthcare professionals. This will, in 7 years from now, it will be 18 million healthcare professionals missing. This means that we don't get less sick, right? There will still be a demand for healthcare, but we will have less people being able to treat and to provide healthcare and care as such. The people that we have, by the way, due to COVID, this was a big accelerator here, so show signs of burnout. There is a so-called depression, suicide, and burnout report coming out every year. If you think about that, something like this exists in the healthcare space, that states that 50% show signs of burnout. If you ask today, here in this country, healthcare professionals, if they would, again, do their job or basically study for their job, 1 out of 3 would say no. And I mean, we are a very purposeful sector. Many people sign up because they have a purpose. It's definitely not because of the money. It's because you want to help people. So that's a very alarming sign. And then today we have got, or last year, we have got a waiting list only in the UK of 6.1 million people. Why is that? Because COVID pushed out all of the elective, let's say, treatments and the elective procedures, because we had to treat people that were in a really bad shape, and we had to fight for their survival. But people didn't get less ill because of COVID. So cancer progressed, heart disease progressed. And this waiting list right now is there, and we have to address it. I don't want to basically draw a doomsday picture here, but that's what we face every day in our industry. I also believe that mankind was always good when they had this kind of push. Whenever there was a big challenge throughout the years or throughout history, mankind was able to address that. And I truly believe we have a lot of the bits and pieces today. We need to address all of these, and you will see afterwards some examples what I mean by that, but we have to bring them together. And we have to do this not in individual stakeholder groups, but as an ecosystem. There are some developments out there that are giving us tailwind and that we could use basically to address all of the 6 challenges that I mentioned. One is the explosion of data. The average hospital, 500 beds around the globe, produces 50 petabytes of data every year. I mean, 50 petabytes is a big number. I do afterwards a kind of guessing game with you how much this is. But if you think about this, this number is growing every year by 50%. So there is a lot of data coming out there. For now, it's produced by mainly imaging, but also by the EMR, by Word documents, by labs, by patient-reported outcomes. So there are a lot of data points that are generated every year. The crime is that 97% of those data points go directly into a silo, and they are not used, because our systems are not set up that they talk to each other. So each department has normally their own system. Why do I tell you that? Because there's a lot of wisdom in all of these data points. We tend to say we have got data-rich institutions, but they are insights poor, because, as I said, 97% of these data points are somewhere in a storage and are never used. To give you a magnitude, and I did this calculation on my own, of how much 50 petabytes of data, so the amount an average hospital produces every year, is, I try to make the comparison to the most undigital thing out there, which is, you see it here? A book, exactly. I mean, book is not digital. I think all of us still read them from time to time and betray our smartphone with books. But if you would capture the amount of data that a hospital produces in books, who would like to guess how many books I would need? Nobody? Just
billion.
Ah, that's good. Normally people start with 1 million, 20 million. You said already 1 billion. Up a little bit.
5 billion.
Oh, we're getting closer. Up a little bit. It's 8 billion books you would need. Or in calculation, 53 times the British Library, which is the largest library on this side of the planet. And now comes the interesting thought. If you are the healthcare professional, the caregiver, that has to find this one sentence that cures your patient in 8 billion books, is this possible? I mean, this comparison with the needle in the haystack is actually possible compared to this, impossible. But that's where technology can basically play a vital role. If we are able to extract all of these data points, bring them together in a space where we could work with it, that's where algorithms, where artificial intelligence basically can do a very good job at the end. It's good in pattern recognition within all of these data points. So we know that the data is exploding. I talked about this, and it's basically happening fast. Now a second seed I want to plant in your heads. This 50 petabytes is mainly what you see on top here. What's generated in a hospital. Could be the EMR data, could be labs, could be imaging, could be all of the sources that provide this 50 petabytes. You have other data sources, like lifestyle and behavioral data. Who has a tracker here from you guys? Anybody is a tracker? Anybody is tracking their kind of sports, food?
Yeah.
What do you guys track?
Steps.
Steps. Good. No, important. Sleep, some do. Some even do food. You could even do menopausis. You could track a lot of things. Your mental health, noise as well. You can track a lot of things. You also have genetics, and you have got social environmental data. What do you believe out of these data sources has the biggest impact on health outcomes? And by what percentage? It's a difficult one, I know, but just to get a feeling, because I got it directly wrong when I saw this graph. I was thinking, hey, and I give you a little bit of a spoiler alert, this is the data I need to treat patients and to influence health outcomes. Who would, in percentage, how much do these data points, the 50 petabytes per hospital, influence healthcare? 50%, 40%, 60%?
30%.
30%? Huh? Oh, this gentleman. Well, the study shows 10% at the end. Because you're focusing on sick care. You're focusing on people who are already sick. There's no prevention. There's no things that basically help you to keep people outside of the hospital, which is what at the end you want to achieve. And so it's not just a data explosion that's happening fast. We have also a variety of data we have to deal with. The problem is, again, each sensor is a data silo. Each health app has a different standard. Each patient-reported outcomes, so prompts, are captured differently in PDF, Word, whatever. And the big innovation that we have to fix, in my point of view, is interoperability. Put these systems together. Then we had this nasty little thing here, which changed all of our lives in the last 3 years. It did a lot of harm, I think, to mankind. It showed how fragile our healthcare systems are. On the other hand, it also accelerated certain kind of movements. I want to walk through 8 movements that I personally believe are giving us, again, tailwind in everything which is digital transformation. First one is telehealth. I'm pretty sure it's here to stay, and the first studies show that. Why? Why?
Accessibility.
One important point. The second one, which we normally never think of, but which should be our first purpose. Infrastructure plays into that a little bit, maybe. Okay. Convenience. I mean, for me, I always make this example. I have a bad ankle. I don't look like, but I played basketball when I was younger quite well. Not the size, but and this was basically hindering that I become a professional. And I go frequently to the doctor with that still after 20 years because it's basically completely messed up. And in COVID, I had exactly this experience. Again, pain, went to the MR, got an MR, and then I basically wanted to go to my doctor of trust. And he's 1.5 hours away from me in another city. Normally what I have to do is, I have to drive there. I always get a parking spot, a ticket, because there's no parking spot free. It's directly in city center. I go there, I wait in the waiting room for, on average, 20 minutes, maybe. Then I have exactly 7 minutes with the doctor. He's a friend of mine. Maybe I get 14 because I get preferred treatment. But then again, I go back, I see the parking ticket, I get annoyed, I go home. All of this procedure, 3 hours. If you now use any kind of telehealth platform, basically it takes you 15 minutes in your lunch break. And the good thing is that our systems just allow 15 and 30 minutes of scheduling time. Suddenly the doctor has to spend with you 15 minutes and cannot just go there and go to the next patient and leave you sitting somewhere. It has a big convenience aspect for patients. And I think 80% I saw in a recent report of the not face-to-face, virtual face-to-face consultancies are staying. But now you see that other tools like chat, like email, like normal calls are also pulling up again. So we are using all of the tools that we have at hand to provide care, which is a good thing, I believe. Always for certain kind of conditions. if somebody should talk to me about my cancer, I want to have this person in person. I don't want to have a machine interlocked, right? So there is also a caveat to that one. But that's a big development that I think will free up time of our sector and will help to make care more accessible and make care more convenient. Second big one is hospitals are in financial distress. Statistics this morning of my home turf, 61% have red numbers of all 2,000 German hospitals. So they are not profitable, they basically lose money. This country, I said before, has an underinvestment for years in terms of medical infrastructure and hospital beds. And guess what? I don't know if this will change, because we will always be working in an environment where resources are scarce and demand will increase. Having said this, a lot of governments understood that they have to at least push money towards digital transformation. I mean, there are various programs throughout Europe or the world where money is invested to renew and improve this infrastructure. That's a good thing, I believe. Furthermore, hospitals are more open to solutions that help you to detect inefficiencies. And they are more open to use not just digital tools on the clinical side, but also on the operational side. Because there, I personally believe, is the bigger lever at this point in time. The 20% of waste, if we could bring this down, our sector would be in a good place. Then we see basically a convergence of healthcare, of wellness, and of fitness. All of these sectors somehow having blurry boundaries right now. And wellness and fitness, they know how to use digital tools, by the way. They use this for a longer time. People are, the advantage here is that the patient, and I use this term on purpose here, becomes also a consumer. They want to be involved mainly in their healthcare journey, and they want to also understand what happens. Not everybody, but you see, especially the younger generation, willing to share data if they get something in return for that. And this also creates, on the one hand, new business models, but also forces us as industry, and I have an example later on what we do there, to collaborate more. Because suddenly we see what I call frenemies. I don't know yet if they are friends or enemies, like Microsoft, like the Googles, who in the past were providers. Now they also, like Amazon, are heavily pushing towards the healthcare sector. And we as a sector have to understand how do we work with them. On top of that, you have got startups that normally try to help the individual on the private side, that also are highly interesting for us. And I have an example of our Edison Accelerator program where we bring this all together. Then also you have a reduction in regulatory, let's say, boundaries. Again, I take an example of my home turf because it's very unique. Since 2 years, it's the first time that we reimburse people to use digital applications on their smartphone. So there's a law that basically says I put the application at the same level as I put a pill, more or less. It's not the complete comparison, but insurances reimburse you if you use certain kind of applications. The good thing here is, first, that you shift away from just treating or addressing the issue towards prevention, because normally the majority of these apps are all this kind of apps that help to go towards prevention. Secondly, you also involve the patient actively in the process and not just give them a pill to address the symptoms. Where this is going, still not really defined, because we are living this through at this point in time. But it, at the end, moves partly, which is also an important point, healthcare outside of the hospital. Again, the 6.1 million people on the waiting list, do they really all have to come in? Or can I somehow triage them and see what I do with them? I talked about this before. The sector is literally living through a moment here where we want to collaborate more. And you see this, that in the past, everybody thought like, hey, I can address the majority of healthcare's issue as a big company on my own. Right now, we figured out, hey, it will not work. So you see that there are a lot of partnerships ongoing, which are newer also to us. I mean, I can just put in the the glasses of a big medtech/digital health company, we are learning here as we speak. In this startup journey I'm going to talk about, we first thought like, hey, it is easy to attract startups and have them working with us. No, they tell us how to be agile. They teach us how to be faster. They also teach us how to be a little bit less risk averse, right? And I have an example here, but this is something where we see this will create a tailwind for us. Then again, a negative fact. If I open up the gates here with telehealth, I get also sometimes, I give the chance for cybersecurity issues. And that's a big one. Also in times of where we are currently geopolitically, healthcare is a strategic sector. So I think in 2022, 82% of hospitals had seen some kind of cyber attack towards their systems. So it's strategic infrastructure. And that's something that we have to address going forward. If you let more people in with telehealth and other devices, you also have people who maybe don't want your good. So that's something we have to live with in the near future as well. I talked about this before. That's likely for me the biggest, and in my space, in the IT space, the biggest innovation I could foster, making all of the systems talk to each other. So interoperability, and we see that there are standards developing that allow us this at this point in time. FHIR is the most prominent one out there that we look at. But at the end, we have to connect two things, people and systems. And that's what's happening step by step. And then there is a demand and rise in the, let's say, demand for artificial intelligence and digital tools. But I have to say, there's always this grain of salt. We still have to do a better job to educate people what the value actually is. I just read a report coming here, which was, for me, not that nice findings. 69% of Americans, it's always in America, still feel uncomfortable if artificial intelligence is part of their healthcare process. I personally thought like people will demand it in the near future because it can help you to basically ensure clinical quality. But right now there is still a big pushback against these tools because we have to still prove what the outcome is. But I think all of these points at the end force us as an industry to basically innovate and work together and come up with solutions that I want to share in a second with you. What we in GE Healthcare believe is that healthcare providers of the future will be successful if they marry three things. Kind of interesting marriage though. If they bring together three things. One is clinical knowledge, their core business. The second one is data science. Third one is technology. And you, right now, each of those are normally silos within the system. But if we can bring them together, that's where you find operational efficiencies. That's where you improve your clinical, at the end, processes. That's also where you find, at the end, ways to improve your financial situation as a hospital. These are the main three things that, if we bring it together, can give you this kind of, I don't call it marriage, combination of three, what we call these. And it all starts with the patient, by the way, with a disease state where you say like, hey, I'm at the point right now where I can collect the data points around Fred, right? Because he's producing data. It's not just mail from France, 40 years. You know what I mean, right? We have the different kind of bits and pieces to combine and have tailor-made treatments at this point in time. We just have to see how it works. How does it work? First thing is we have to bring together or break these data silos and bring the data somewhere together where you can work with it, right? And it's not just the typical data points that you would expect, right? Because I always make this example when I go to my private practitioner. I go there every 2 years for a general check. And I always have to, in Germany we are in some things very advanced, in some we are not. So he's my childhood general practitioner. I'm working. I have by hand to fill out who I am. I go there every 2 years since I'm 4 years old. Then I have to tell him I'm a man. I stopped smoking when I was 20. I'm not pregnant and don't plan to be. But all of the information is somewhere captured in my handwriting, by the way, which normally is not the best way to do so. right? But what I want to do here is you have to bring together all of these data points, and we all have them. I always ask myself, it is easy to wire money from here, right now, via PayPal, anywhere into the world. If I want to get my general practitioner report in Germany from there to the hospital, I need a fax sometimes. Still 15% use fax in Germany. But the point here is that any solution that helps you to aggregate this data point and breaks these data silos, that's what we are working on. Second thing is you then have to put around that capabilities that help you to work with the data. Again, the interoperability bit. Today, maybe, and I have to guess here, 10% of the data you have is structured. The vast majority is somewhere in a PDF, Word, on your wrist, and all in different formats. So the idea is to bring this all together into one platform where you then can work with it. What do you want to do? You want to apply artificial intelligence. That's what I talked about before. You want to recognize patterns within this data that give you this nugget of wisdom in the 8 billion books, this one sentence that could help you to improve the treatment of your patient. And after that, basically, you want to apply that in three levels. One is clinically, but in the care pathway where your person at the end has a disease, right? If I have somebody with a heart disease, I need maybe other data points than I have somebody with cancers. And in the, unfortunately, as we are getting older, many times I've got multiple conditions that I have to look at. But that's what we want to achieve as an ecosystem, I have to say. Because we would be arrogant as GE if we would say we have all of these solutions. So partnering is a big one in the future. And as I said, this at the end applies throughout care areas in the hospital, but also to other things. I have an example here, which is a command center, which also helps you to improve your operations throughout the entire healthcare systems. Or operational excellence. I have another example that helps you to basically predict who's not showing up to certain kind of exams. Let us dive, and you feel free to stop me, by the way. I already talk a lot here. I hope it's interesting for you. What I thought I do is I go from micro to macro. So I brought one example of a patient at home, and I end at the end at a wide hospital system. Here's a device that some of you may know. Anybody know what that is? What is it?
Alive core.
What is it? What does it do? Is it a lighter or is it?
ECG, remote ECG
Excellent.
capture device.
What's the big advantage of this thing? Of this little thing as big as a lighter, which you can buy at Amazon for $189.
So if you think you're having something like atrial fibrillation, you can it can capture an epoch anywhere, and then you post it off, and someone will analyse it, and then your GP has a headache trying to get you into a pathway, because one NHS pathways were never included to think about these things, and the demand that could place on healthcare is huge.
But it also can help you to do what?
Well, potentially to striate patients into a level of risk.
Yeah. And keep people out of the hospital if they don't have to come. Yeah,
Potentially.
potentially. You're right, but it is an ECG device called Cardia L6, Cardia Mobile S6. As I said, it's not a GE product. You can buy that in Amazon at this point in time. But where it gets interesting is we formed a partnership with AliveCore because of one thing, interoperability. If I right now capture these data points on my mobile phone and I go to my, I can send it to people by PDF, but it's not in the workflow of the healthcare professional. And today, I think in UK, I write an email afterwards to not say something wrong here. Guess how much time a normal doctor spends with patients? Of 100%, how much?
You mean GP, a family doctor, or
No, a normal hospital, in the hospital. Average, by the way. I think it's averaged out through cardio, radio, whatever you have at the care area. It's around 12%. which means 88% they are either in front of, it's not that they're not working, by the way, right? They're in a system trying to pull data together. They spend significant amount of time in front of something called EMR to just put the data points together. And that's where this partnership that we formed with AliveCore gets very powerful, because what we do is we partner that with our Muse software, and it's directly integrated. So you don't need to change the workflow of the healthcare professional. And it sounds like very easy, but it's a very powerful fact. If I just have the AliveCore device, I can still do the measurement. I can still basically send it to my GP, but they have to know how the application works. They have to know how basically how to read this kind of, how to extract the data. Here, it directly goes into our Muse software, and it's thus in the system, and it can connect to the EMR. It's in the history. If you don't do that, you again just have a moment in time, right? If it's connected to your wider IT ecosystem, or to your wider IT ecosystem, you are able to do comparisons, history, and all of these things. Look, the workflow basically works like the physician just goes into his normal system, or her normal system, and sees the data there. For the benefit for the physician is that they don't have to learn new tools. They don't have to change the way how they work. And they get this 360, hopefully soon, patient jacket of information. The patient...
Is this live and available to use now in healthcare, or is this in a development environment?
The gentleman here is an expert.
So actually, we are coming up in the coming months with this. So we are just testing it for the time being.
Because we have patients that attend ED in Edinburgh who have AF or symptoms of AF, and we are sending some of the patients home with a AliveCore to take epochs of ECG. But because of patient confidentiality, kind of issues, information governance, that data is anonymized, and there's no KI or methods to link that back to the patient's record, because we use Muse. I think Brian uses Muse. This would seem an obvious.
Yeah, we use Muse and these devices.
Yeah, we do, but they're not linked up in any way.
That's part of the workflow is going to be implemented. So basically, the approach would be the patient has the tool, and there will be a code to link the system to the Muse. So in that way,
so it'd be an anonymized code.
And you can recognize, for example, patient Aldo from patient Kate, and you will have all the data flowing into the folder. But there should be this kind of code to
link it up.
That's part of the workflow that we are implementing.
So you're working on that at the moment?
Yes.
And this is literally in preparation 2022. Press release one was in June last year, 6 months ago when we signed the partnership. Right. More or less 8 months by now. But that's
very interesting to follow that up.
Yeah, I'll follow up with you on this one.
And again, for me, one of the bigger basically benefits are for the patient convenience. Plus, I help to keep, it sounds kind of for hospital interesting, to keep people away from me, right? Because of the 6.1 million and the overloaded other departments I have. That's an example where we move hospital care outside of the hospital. And we will see more of that, because all of these devices get more accurate. You can track blood pressure on your wrist. There are many more things to come going forward. Another way where we can apply digital tools is at the end for healthcare professionals. And I brought an example out of my day-to-day world, where I spend most of my time in the radiology target group. AI can be used, or has 4 major benefits today in the imaging world. One is triage, and we saw this in COVID heavily, right? Triage is a concept of the French Civil War, I think, where you say, hey, Simon is severely ill, treat him first. Again, I pick on you, Fred. Fred is healthier, in better shape, he can still wait, basically. It assigns, I think even there's a thing called Manchester triage, where it assigns colors, depending on the severity of your conditions and who has to be treated. And there, AI can do today a stellar job, actually, to address that. Second point is decision support, right? It can tell you what, if I take all of these data points I have, into account, this would be the right treatment for Simon at this point in time. And you still need the healthcare professional who has to validate that and who has a broader knowledge. But it can give you the next pass in the kind of care journey. Then there's a thing in radiology called assistant reading. I don't talk too much about that because you will see it in a second what this actually means. But to give you a kind of idea here, how many shades of gray do you believe the human eye can distinguish? A trained radiologist in their 35, 38 years. More or less. There's a film called like that, by the way. Is that? But the name says how many you can more or less. It's between 45 and 50, and then if you get older, it gets less. Shades of different kind of black and white colors. How much do you think an algorithm can distinguish?
3,000 or something like that.
250. 5 times more. And the
It's probably about 8 bits.
so, but look, the algorithm doesn't get annoyed by certain kind of things, doesn't get tired, doesn't have a bad day, right? If there's energy and data, normally they are quite accurate. And this is why I said before, I thought that patients would demand that at some point in time, AI is part. I'm not saying everything is done by AI, but AI is part of the care pathway, because there, in assistant reading, there's a clear sign, and I have a personal example of my brother-in-law who had the condition I'm going to show in a second, and it was not detected in the hospital. He went home, being in life-threatening conditions, and was basically going back to hospital 16 hours later with a pneumothorax, and spent significant amount of time in the hospital, and afterwards also recovering as a normally completely fit human being. And then you have got, for me again, likely the most important part, which is AI is good in taking over redundant tasks that many times you don't want to do. Reporting is one of those, where I think on average, even to get reimbursement, sometimes you have to spend a certain amount of writing these kind of letters. But if you would standardize that, it could help many people, I think, to basically improve the care pathway. And there are ways to do that where AI can basically, especially in quality and in redundant tasks. You're laughing?
I wonder how many radiologists will be happy to let ChatGPT. I'm not sure very many at the moment. But I had an interesting conversation with radiology leads a while back. You know, radiologists have a target accuracy. They're not 100%, and it's an interesting sort of medico-ethical, legal thing. You know, if AI, machine learning, is as good as a radiologist, you know, is that good enough? We, as humans, we seem to think that technology should and has to be 100% accurate, but a human being isn't.
And there's again the point. I mean, for me, that's why I still believe this kind of marriage between both things will be with us for quite some time. It augments basically your capabilities as a human being. That's what it's a tool, but it's a powerful tool that augments what you can do at this point in time, and helps you to see things that you wouldn't see because of certain things, and it takes time away that you could spend somewhere else. There's again this ethical question: if you could do more patients, this is what normally people, what your CEO wants, right? But it could also mean that you spend more time in training, or more time at the care site, or more time in talking to patients, right? That's what we still have to define as a sector. But look, I brought an example of what I call AI orchestration. What happens is, these kind of devices produce so-called DICOM data. They shoot them into a picture archiving communication system, so a system that is able to take this data. From there, normally, what the radiologist has to do is, he has to say, based on this data, I have to run this application. There are more than 300 AI applications out there. Some are G, some are not. You have to open it, like an app on your phone. You have to basically learn the user experience, and you have to run that. Takes away a lot of time of radiologists. That's one thing. And if you talk to this Perseus group, what they tell you is, it's literally what they say: I don't want a single click more in my system. If you give me a single click more in my workflow, I don't do it. And that's what we want to do here is, with a software that takes the DICOM information, applies defined rules and roles that we define together with the hospital. Basically, it mines the information and then looks into a set of algorithms I might have, chooses it, runs them, and plays the result back into your normal workflow without you having to open any kind of click. This means we did a chest scan. There is no chest scan, basically. It's in there. The algorithm detects Simon Rost, 40 years, this kind of DICOM information. Basically, chest, so apply the chest application suite. It runs it. The AI does the magic, looks into the scan, and puts it back where it can now be consumed. Until now, in the radiologist world, nothing changed. As I said, if they would basically don't have the solution, they would have to open each of these algorithms, learn the new user experience, and so forth. We embed it seamlessly in the workflow. And what happens is this. First thing is we do a triage. So when the algorithm, this is what the radiologist sees and lives in every day, the working list, where they get provided what they have to do. First thing that happened is we basically put Simon Rost in the list on top because, hey, the algorithm found a critical condition. You as a radiologist have a sign here that tells you, have a deeper look. The algorithm found something. What normally radiologists tend to do is they don't want to see the results that AI found. They want to see the scan themselves, to train, to stay in there and to understand what happened. Secondly, it gives you already, before you see the scan, a clue of what this could be. It says, hey, with a 96% of likelihood of confidence, I found a collapsed lung, a pneumothorax, which is, if you detect it early, you can treat this easily. Not easily, but you can treat it, and it's not that bad. If you don't detect it, case of my brother-in-law, it can become a life-threatening condition, even for a completely fit person. And then that's what we had with augmented reading. Normally, what you do is, as a radiologist, you go to this side of the scan, and you try to see what's happening. And you can see quite evident. I'm not a radiologist, but if you have somebody in the room, they would tell you, you would recognize that. It's not a small one. It is something that that you would see. But now again, what happens if you are in the emergency department, in a major situation, a lot of stress is ongoing, and this individual had already 18-hour shift, right? And is not as fit as it would be. You could miss that one. So there is the augmented reading capability. It overlays basically, the AI shows you where you should look, and again it tells you what it found and where it would be. And then what you can do, even automate it, you directly send basically a notification to the care team that says, hey, this individual has to be in the OR in the next couple of hours. Please get ready. The advantage of this solution is that you are not changing the way how people work on the one hand. On the other hand, you automate certain kind of things that would take time and so forth. Plus, you also, again, for my world important, you take work away from the IT department because you read all of these algorithms and you give them a suite that they can work with. These are results that we see so fast. It improves your workflow by 60% in terms of time. It also increases your quality by 20% in certain kind of things. But this is where AI basically helps you to automate certain kind of tasks. On the other hand, also gives you clinical confidence. And that's where it's applied at the healthcare professional level.
So we've had conversations about a number of these machine learning algorithms, and I noticed on your previous slide you had not for diagnostic purposes written on there, which opens up a whole grey area of when is something a medical device and when is it not a medical device.
Mm-hmm.
And we genuinely don't know the answer to this. So if something changes the priority with which a radiologist is going to look at that image, it may slow that down and move it lower down the risk, or it may, by moving other things up the list, mean another one takes longer to be looked at by a radiologist. So that potentially has patient critical impact.
It has, yeah.
In terms of
it could have, yeah.
reprioritising resource. Now, if something is not for diagnostic purposes and has been declared not a medical device. So we don't have the same degree of confidence in that piece of software as we would for something that's CE marked or UKCA marked. Then that leaves us with a great number of questions.
I mean,
and secondly, at the moment in the EU, GDPR says somebody can opt out of AI.
okay. I mean, yeah. Then
How do you handle, and I don't know the answer to this one either, how do you handle a patient who has...
who says on purpose, I don't want AI to cut?
Yeah.
That's an interesting one. We never.
In advance, you know, someone who maybe they've spent 20 hours on Twitter and is paranoid about and has conspiracy theories about everything and contacts the hospital group and says, I never want any of my data to be assessed by AI. We have no mechanism at the moment to flag that individual up so that these kind of things are not applied to them.
I mean, the first question I can address, likely it's an old slide I used. There are 300 something, GE has 52 FDA approved and CE marked applications, which are basically in the, this is likely it was our own pneumothorax suite. I likely took a slide from 2020, where it was not yet CE marked, but we have, I think GE has 52 of those applications somewhere FDA approved and CE marked. The second one is a good one. It's literally a good one. It's the same that we have certain kind of groups that don't want to receive blood or have certain kind of, it's an interesting one where for sure, I'm honest, I don't have the direct answer right now.
Because it's a kind of a new, it's a new technology. You know, that we were talking just before we started about the rise of people who are reluctant to engage in certain things in healthcare, you know, the conspiracy theory that wants to wear an aluminium tin hat on, full hat on to stop people reading their brainwaves and everything else. You know, it's, we can laugh at people like that, but there are people like that. And
do you see many patients saying that they don't want, you know?
I don't think many know that they have that right.
How much more do I have? 10 more minutes?
But
Okay.
there are some who have
Can I send it? Okay.
and say they don't want that kind of thing to happen. And our IT department at the moment has kind of tried to brush that under the carpet and officially NHS Lothian doesn't use AI. Really? Kate?
I couldn't comment, but I don't think that's true.
Yeah?
But exactly the stroke AI solution will be rolled out fairly soon, and all boards will be using that.
And we've seen, you know, some of the vendors that have offered us machine learning solutions for stroke have underclassified their devices. Should be at least class 2A or 2B, and we've seen stuff that's class 1. So the regulation is not keeping pace with
And by far not.
technology by a long...
No, I mean, this I would even, we still treat an algorithm like a medtech device. Think about that. I mean, an agile process is 6 weeks normally when they change stuff. So all of these algorithms cannot learn because it's not allowed by law to say, hey, I play the results back to make them learn. They are all used on the data.
Learning in the wild.
Yeah, they're just on the data set where they have been trained on. And that's something where I believe, how can you compare a software solution to a physical device? There's big differences between the two. But the FDA is working on that as well to see how you address that, but in a interesting pace, let's say. But yeah, there's a lot of things to do. And I have no answer to your question, to be honest. I don't know.
I think you would, because I don't think anyone has. But it's just worth flagging these things up, that these are, you know, these are things that we're having to grapple with as well. And then there's the whole stuff about apps that should be CE marked and aren't.
Yeah, and there's an explosion of applications. And in my last example, how we work with them at this point in time, it's interesting because they all pop out like a lot, but then who guarantees that they are sustainable? We have, for example, a good example, Learning Curve our own. We had a quite successful app called MaxQ that decided to leave the market. They had a solution. We embedded them with a lot of work into our workflow, and then they said, hey, we don't continue. We're like, how can't you continue? We have now made everything possible, but they said we have other areas. And that's also, there will be consolidation ongoing.
It's the fundamental difference between consumer technology, where Google can launch a home thermostat and 5 years later decide that this is going to stop it like that.
In healthcare, it's difficult.
You have to tell your notified body or approved organisation what the lifespan of the product is, how long you're going to support. And we rely on that information to know what we're bringing in.
It's a good point.
It's
about to
Yeah.
say something.
Yeah, just regarding the proportion of people potentially opting
This is
out,
my coffee.
hydro
This is my
carbohydrates,
coffee.
whatever.
This is my
But
coffee.
in clinical
That's
research
empty.
and observation studies, when we ask people if they
This is
share
mine.
their anonymized data with researchers, it's about 1 to 5% of people refusing just because of the idea of having shared data. Probably it will be much lower for
So-
care than for research,
Yeah.
but it might be significant.
Yeah.
Even
So
0.5% will be an enormous amount
Yeah,
of
in
people.
NHS Lothian, so that was 1% of what, 800,000 people is.
Yeah. And regarding use of technology for diagnosis or not, what about, and do we have any experience with the already old-fashioned ECG technology that we use from more than 20 years with the interpretation of the pattern?
Yeah.
12SL.
I don't know if there is any.
12SL, would you use 12SL?
Yeah.
Or market
Yeah.
12SL. That's the ECG interpretation, yeah?
Yes, but
Well, when is something just an algorithm? You know, in some respect, everything's an algorithm. Is it deterministic? Can we prove it's deterministic? Particularly at the machine learning end. But you know, I've argued this. You know, even setting a rate threshold on a patient monitor, that's an algorithm.
It's interesting because when you see, I always and that's a business hat. It's not a clinician hat. When you think how you evaluate technology, you first ask where is it applied, in which area. Is it radiology, cardiology? Second thing you ask is what is it doing actually? What is it doing to the workflow? Third thing is, in our case, what's the commercial potential of something like that? If you look into, you talked about ECG and everything which is cardiology and so forth, is still, we see right now picking up. First was pathology by far. Then it was mainly radiology because they have this amount of data at the end. They have this data that they can mine through. And now you see that other care areas will pick up step by step. But radiologists have always been a little bit more IT, let's say, oriented than others. That's why they are the typical test bed for many things. But if you see PubMed, which is publishing all of this research studies, and you look into AI, I think by far the biggest is pathology. 1/3 of all studies out there of the 15,000 you saw. Then next one would be radiology, and cardiology is somewhere in the 5th, 6th. So I expect that more things are coming as we speak.
My point is that we don't necessarily need to have diagnosis. We may orient the radiologists and not taking the responsibility of making the diagnosis. Decision support more than
Additional input.
making, which will be
So if
medically very
if you
different.
listen to the MHRA, they're very much of the opinion that they don't buy the argument that doesn't need to be regulated because it's decision support.
And I don't say that it doesn't need to be
Well,
regulated, but might be regulated in a different way because
maybe they're moving towards, in the UK, a definition of a medical device, software as a medical device that takes inputs, processes it, and outputs it. Pretty much that covers everything.
Yeah. But to your point, I mean, it's not very well structured. What is AI today? You know, TravelCell is a good example. We have been using it like for the last 20 years.
In my personal opinion, I think it's a buzzword.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's used to get venture capitalists on board to fund product development. What's it, you know, when I was doing my PhD 30 years ago, we called it neural networks.
Yeah.
yes, absolutely, and people doing research using exactly the same kind of
But now it's all called AI,
methods is
and it's sexy.
That's 2 point, eh? It's a 2 point. I mean, a lot of these things are not that new.
Yeah.
Completely shift in terms of applications. On departmental level, you all see that. Empty chair. What does that mean for a hospital? Good or bad? Depends.
Inefficiency.
There's a so-called thing called no-shows. People who don't show up for exams. And that's a real harm to income of hospitals. Guess how much, 2018, how many people didn't show up? And how large here in the NHS the kind of impact is supposed or should have been.
10%. More. I would say more.
This was before COVID, by the way, right? I mean, interesting one.
40 to 50?
No.
No.
We've got 10 to 20.
I think 10 to 20%.
A little bit below 10 it is, a little bit below 10, but in terms of people, 8 million people, 8 million appointments have not taken place, costing the NHS 1 billion. If you average the costs of each of these treatments, diagnosis at £120. And this is what you would have done with this kind of money, if you would have had it. 57,000 hip replacements, or a little bit under 1 million of eye operations. That's what you lost in 2018 before COVID. Now you have the issue that likely it gets even more pressure with this, this empty chair. Why? Because you have the 6.1 million waiting for treatment somewhere. Right? If now one individual is not showing up, this could be a big harm to your organization, because you have to have the space anyways. And by the way, we are not allowed to do things like airlines, like double booking and so on. We have to guarantee the access to the healthcare sector. So like, we cannot say, hey, if 2 heart attacks come at the same time, the one who basically waits gets an extra ticket, and it's not possible, right? I mean, without making fun about that. These are things that were under consideration. Like using in other sectors, they do this frequently. Double booking is a frequent thing whenever you jump on a plane. Likely the plane is overbooked. Likely you find somebody who takes the extra hour waiting time and gets some kind of perk, or one individual is not showing up. And that's where I'm...
And that's the case in many systems. When I worked in Belgium, it was standard to overbook clinics by 20%, meaning that sometimes everybody came and people had to wait sometimes 90 minutes at the end of the day. That was just my daily life, and then apologizing. That's just crazy. And other days, 30, 40 people a percent of people wouldn't come.
That's an interesting one, but this is something where we spend time on as well. We see normally this is a common number, that 6.7% of people are not showing up. Like everything, you can use predictive analytics to have at least a clue, more or less. If I'm in Munich, it's Oktoberfest, and you have an appointment at 7 in the morning on a Monday after Sunday, last day, the likelihood of many people out of the area of showing up would be not that likely.
For what?
Yeah. Maybe for some kind of aspirin, yes, but for normal, but without making fun here, right? So AI can predict basically these kind of no-shows. We have an algorithm that takes into account roughly 64 different variables. Could be patient data, could be, if we have it, your past history, also could be weather and traffic information, is age, right? To then assign a likelihood score to Simon Rost, Oktoberfest Monday, 7:30, X-ray scan. And the likelihood would be that Simon will not show up for, I don't know, 77% likelihood he's not showing up. What we also do, we can give you forecasts and trends, and we can provide countermeasures to exactly what you said, to address that, saying, hey, don't even show this meeting to Simon Rost. He's not going to turn up anyways, with a likelihood of 77% to ditch the exam. Or I can tell him, like, look, I send reminders, the typical things that you know from other industries. That's what you can apply here. And we see customers bring down the no-show rate from 4.6 to 1.2%. If you apply this decrease to the 8 million that I showed you in the beginning of the NHS, to the 1 billion of loss, that's quite a saving that would recompensate some of the hip replacements or some of the cataract operations. But that's a completely different example, where you use data, real-time data, to basically guarantee access and address the backlog of patients that we have. And the last one is all of that I would call on steroids. So we have this thing here. Do you know what this is? A command center. A concept that we have from the air industry, more or less, on a also service industries use this quite a lot. It's real-time access to data. And before I talk about it in detail, I brought some voices of the installation we have on this side of the planet, roughly 450 kilometers, I think, south from here. We have an installation in the Bradford Teaching Hospital. that is one of our installations here in Europe, or in this area, where they're using it. And I bought a short video where the team is talking about that. Oh, I have no sound.
Yeah, coming, sorry.
But as I said, this is roughly 400 kilometers to the south, 4 hours drive, where this solution is applied.
I come in about 7 o'clock, pretty much every day of my life. I'm lucky enough to have a coffee machine in my own room and make a coffee, have a bit of porridge, and then immediately open emails. It can be relatively stressful, but it doesn't get more stressful until you open an email and there's a load of incidents that have happened overnight. I think the biggest problem is the visualization or the visibility of the truth of capacity and demand. That's the obvious one, but there's also the lack of visibility of standardization of processes for patient pathways.
One of the biggest challenges is patient flow and ensuring that every patient that comes through an acute hospital has value added to their stay.
We've got multiple systems that are getting us data streams from different resources, be that bloods, x-rays, the electronic patient records, and there was no single system that brought all those elements together and packaged it in a way that made it useful for everybody, so you had one standard version of the truth.
The command centre is designed to give us a single version of the truth in real time.
So the command centre information provides real-time information, and it's not just information, it actually provides alerts for us so that we can home in on where our problem areas actually are.
So I think this is truly game-changing, and in maybe 3, 4, 5 years time from now, we will look back and wonder how we ever managed to deliver healthcare without the support of something like a command centre.
It's brought together teams of people who work in Bradford for Bradford's patients. It's brought them together to be involved in making sure that the tiles that are live in the command centre actually deliver the information that is important to them to help them improve their services at ward and department level. But also the bespoke area allows us to hold our site meetings.
It's allowed me to have an infrastructure to standardise the way we approach the different areas of improvement that we've identified. It's given us a more robust governance structure, and it's also allowed us to target areas that we know is a problem in a more sustained fashion.
The command centre unlocks the potential assets that we've got and capacity we might not know about. It's something that really supports our clinicians and our managers to take effective action.
Here, two things come together. One is technology. The other important aspect is that all of these people you see there are not new employees. They have been in the hospital somewhere in a silo, and in this example they are brought together in a physical space as well. This doesn't always have to be the case. There are also virtual command centers where you don't have a physical presence, all of them together. That's the maximum where you could get. But the idea is that you harness data in real time from many systems, and you make it available in so-called tiles. Tile is just another fancy word for application, right, from the marketing standpoint. By today, we have 39 tiles, depending on different kind of areas within the hospital system. We have 290 command centers around the world installed, access to more hospitals. This includes virtual and physical ones. And as I said, one is 400 kilometers south of here. What you do is you basically put patient and resource information in real time together to see what happens. Here I brought you the infectious disease tile. In terms of COVID, it was very important. On top you see basically the patient load, who's there, and if you would hover over them, you would see the status, conditions, what's happening, right? On the right, you see your free beds and your free capacity rooms towards that. So, and you can see in real time how this is basically behaving, and if you have to take countermeasures. If you are in a physical space, you have the people who could take the countermeasures at hand. They are not somewhere on a phone call or something normally away. Plus, you can use also predictive analytics, don't have to call it AI, but analytics to see with certain kind of information, how is this progressing? When do I have to close my ICU and say, hey, I cannot admit more patients? Or when do I have to have extra shifts? And that's one example where this was applied. There are other ones in the radiology, in the cardiology world. The idea is to basically give a real-time overview of the patient's journey throughout the hospital with every kind of bottleneck that could be there. And as I said, in the ones where we have it, this is also available on your phone or on your iPad. You don't have to be physically in the room. If you basically bring the people into a room, you also re-engineer sometimes your entire way of how you provide care. That's something which is there's a big change management component also with that. But I truly believe that this is something, maybe not in 4 to 5 years, but that will be, especially in larger hospital systems, could be applied. And in the NHS, it's also with Bradford one area where we're doing that. And these were four examples of where we are applying today, actually, with partners, by the way, digital technology throughout the care continuum. I don't know how much more time I have.
Slightly over, but yeah, you can carry on.
Are you guys still interested, or should I? Okay, then the last thing I want to talk a little bit about is how we see innovation in GE Healthcare, because we are also going through a shift here, and we, I said this before, we are very sure that you need an ecosystem to address healthcare problems, and that not just one individual player can achieve that. And that's why we launched 2 years ago, it's all about collaboration, and that's why we launched 2 years ago what we call the Add-in Accelerator. That's a program where we bring together, let's say, nearly the entire healthcare industry to work on selected problem statements. And the problem statements are not coming from GE. They come from our partners, which are the healthcare institutions. But what we do here is we bring together all of these parties, and I'm going deeper into each of those in a second. They basically launch a problem statement in certain kind of technology areas. They work in a sprint together in a time frame of 8 months. And after that, hopefully we have a solution. If not, basically we go on, right? But that's the kind of idea to together innovate around predefined problems. How does it work? The startup normally brings in the technology and the kind of innovative, let's say, the innovation. They taught us in the last years how to be agile, because two worlds clash normally here if you have a larger medtech company. And this how in the past innovation has been done. Startup, industry work together, come up with solutions that likely nobody really needs, correct? Because that many times what happens is the innovation is there, but it's not applied to the right problem statement. That's where the healthcare provider institutions come into play. So we have in each of these tracks partners. We distinguish between two partners. One is a consulting partner that says there's a need for it, and the other one is more of a development partner that really puts data, people, expertise into this 8 months process to develop the solution. Likely the most important bit of this entire wheel you see here, because they at the end tell us what we should work on. And it needs to be a real problem. If not, there's no value in that. Then we also open up to industry partners, because they have a tech stack, like AWS has cloud, Intel has a computing power, where we believe it should be part of the equation. We work with academia and have a program called Hello AI, where we want to also foster, let's say, the understanding of these new technologies. We have people that help us also to get the right startups into the mix, because believe it or not, GE doesn't always work with startups, and to screen them and to see if they are sustainable, we need basically expertise. And that's why we partnered with Vira and these institutions you see on the right. But the idea is two things. One is, and it's not just some kind of marketing buzz. It is done on eye level, right? We learned that sometimes, first thing was like we thought 1,000 startups will sign up and want to work with that. Surprise, surprise. Not always the case, because they say, hey, GE Healthcare, I know them, but I want to be basically neutral. I want to work with you. I want to work with Philips. And that's what also is a big part here, that there's no exclusivity to only work with GE. We believe so. I always make this comparison, being German, I like cars. Basically, if you learn how to drive on a certain kind of car, you likely return to that. And it's no joke, the first car I drove was a Ford, and being a German driving a Ford is not normal, but I still like Ford somehow. It's no joke. It's still because it's how I learned driving when I was 18 years old, so back in the age. And same idea applies here a little bit. If they learn on our tech solutions, we believe that they would come back. And that's what came out of the first cohort. So we defined 3 problem statements that came, by the way, from the healthcare providers. They were also involved in the selection process of the startups they would like to work with. The first one was around the concept I basically told you, how you orchestrate artificial intelligence into your radiology workflow. So we paired MRAD, one of our main customers, with Lucida Medical, which is an AI application for prostate MR detection, and Radiobotics, which is an X-ray application for fractures and so forth. And they worked 8 months around how can you integrate these solutions into the standard way of working of MRAD. And this is still ongoing. We are basically having contracts, and we are going to commercialize both of these solutions together with our package. This was the first one. The second one was around how can I capture data to somehow address this 20% waste in the oncology care pathway. So we had Allianz Medical, also based here, but a pan-European chain, and we paired them with Sprite. Sprite is a chat bot that also does no-show prediction. But we wanted to see how can we automate certain kind of things and help to structure the care pathway. And My Clinical Outcomes is at the end a patient-reported outcome provider that gives additional information to somehow see how can we take waste out of this care pathway. And the last one is one that excited me most, but it's also for us as a normally working more with the hospital space, some kind of greenfield here. It is around how can you basically involve the patient more in the care pathway. And we paired here Leggett Health, which is a Spanish company that does basically myoma screening and so on with your smartphone, with Ribera Salud in Spain and with the Manchester University Fund, to see how can we involve patients more from the beginning on. Similar idea like the Alaf Core, an example, how can we bring them together and get more information earlier in the care process, maybe even not having them admitted into the hospital or into the healthcare system. And these are all basically problem statements we worked on the last 8 months. Now we go for the second cohort, where cardio will be a bigger focus. But the idea here is to bring all of these institutions together and then work 8 months to find innovation that at the end is available for the entire sector. With this closing thoughts, look, I really believe that yes, we are a sector under pressure. Yes, it's challenged, but I also believe we have the bits and pieces, and we have technology there that could make our life easier. We are close to this kind of tipping point where we have to address that. Then I also said before, the future institutions which are together, they have to get at least somehow their feet wet in data science, and they have to marriage this with clinical knowledge. That's where I believe a lot of power will be for our sector, not just on the clinical side, on the one that you can improve clinical, let's say, excellence, but also on the waste detection and on taking redundant steps out of the system. Then there are key 2 levers where that at the end will somehow guarantee and accelerate this digital transformation. One is all of these technologies are there. I truly believe that, but we don't make yet the right use of it, and we are in some countries, especially where I'm from, very good in over-regulating, and we always find things why you should not do certain kind of things. I'm not saying regulation is not important, but I'm saying we have to somehow get a little bit faster in getting these tools into our workflows, on the one hand. And the second one is it is a joint effort. And that's happy to connect you afterwards with all of these institutions you saw on the slide, they will tell you the real deal how working with GE in the innovation space is, because I would be a filter. But many of them are in the second cohort now with us, which means the first one was not that bad. And then, as I said, likely the most important thing is that the problem statement comes from the people who know what this problem statement should be, and that's normally the healthcare provider. And they are crucial, basically, in guaranteeing that we not just develop the right digital solutions, but also that these are scalable and are not a one-off basically effort. And that's all I had to share. Happy to answer any kind of question, or I will be around also in the breaks, so wherever you want to take that.
Okay. Any other questions?
If I may have this one question. You mentioned waiting lists, 6-7 million people. You have mentioned reimbursement of apps in Germany.
In Germany.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Digital apps, yeah.
You have mentioned smartwatch or little Fitbit or thing like that. What about considering these different aspects to when we speak about transforming waiting list into preparation lists? And it might be a possibility to facilitate or to democratize exercise medicine, rehabilitation before surgery and things like that by just proposing kind of wearable technology for people needing to improve their fitness and possibly
normally here.
Using this waiting list to improve their condition rather than what's currently observed is a deterioration of the condition when people are on waiting list. So it might be a possibility, but risky way of development, of course, because we don't really know to what extent or which subgroup may particularly benefit from that kind of program, but it might be also a way
it's an interesting
to
one.
Use technology used for monitoring, but
I mean,
for improving
general health. I mean that's what I said before in one of the trends, that you see this convergence between fitness, wellness, and healthcare. It's a big one, because if I look at all of you, who had a tracker here? You had one. Normally, people who have a tracker likely are not always the ones who need it. No, it's no joke. I mean, that's not. Yeah, but that's normally it's people who anyways are involved in their healthcare journey, who want to change things. And I always take this example. My father is heavily overweight. And we went together to Russia years ago, and I had this very old, I was training for a half marathon, and I had this old normal watch. And then basically one gentleman asked me what this is. I told him in Russia, look, that's a pulse watch that tells me how I train. And then he asked my father, who was like he's triple my size, do you also have one? And she's like, do I look like? I mean, no, but to make this, it's a one joke. On the other hand, it's normally the people who would benefit from it are not using this kind of thing. And that's something where it's an interesting thought. I also believe that these boundaries will be more blurry in the future, because there are some companies where I would myself. There's a company called Kaya Health in Germany. It's mainly an application, also you can have it here in New York, that helps you to, it's against back pain, and it helps you to do your exercise in front of your smartphone, and it's correcting you if you do something wrong. On top of that, you have certain kind of educational classes around what you could do different, how to also treat with pain, because pain management is a big one. It helps you to meditate. If you look into it, it is not yet a medical application or device. I would argue it is. It falls into the fitness space, but it's addressing both things. On the one hand, you do prevention. On the other hand, you do pain management, which is clearly, if you ask me, a healthcare sector, it's an interesting thought. And with the wearables, the biggest issue I see today is the interoperability with data. It is still the point, how do I get it into my system, like we did the partnership with AliveCore, that the healthcare professional can really work with it and doesn't have to have spent time to first dismantle the data, put it into the workflow, understand what it means, make it comparable, right? Because that's the 88% that doctors are spending right now in getting somehow the information they need to treat, and not. So this would be for now, I guess, one of the bigger barriers would be the interoperability. How do I?
It's a huge issue.
Yeah.
Absolutely huge issue. I mean, and in Scotland, Kate, you may have had a bit of involvement in rehab, but certainly Brian and I are aware of, although not directly involved with, blood glucose, diabetes. You know, which one is it? Oh God, it's the wearable.
Yeah, that you put into.
No, for diabetes, closed loop glucose control. Yeah, it's either Freestyle Libre or the other one, or Dexcom, one of the two, and that's prescribed by healthcare professionals, that device, and yet the manufacturer insists that the data's theirs.
Yeah, I mean, this is also.
It's not. You know, how can it be anything other than that data belongs to that individual
Patient, yeah. But that's an interesting one. But long term, I truly believe that there's no way around giving the patient ownership of the data. Long term. The problem is that right now you first have, it comes back to the study that I mentioned in the beginning in the US. Yeah, there is a shift that people want to take part of their care pathway, but it's not the majority. If 60% are still feeling uncomfortable in digital technology, I don't call it AI, being part of their care pathway, there is an educational journey that has to be done. Right now, it's interesting because I try to track all of my personal healthcare data, and it's not easy. I mean, in Germany, every insurancer launches their own app portal, and then after 2 years they change it again. So just in this transition, I lost already some of my information and that's just what my insurancer has. And they should have everything. They should have every visit, because I always put in my chip card if I go somewhere, right? But it is something, but my message is, in the long run, there is no, and you see this also in the legislation on European level, there is, it will go towards more ownership and empowerment of patients in their own data as well. But right now, you're right. Some of these things are still, companies are not opening up.
Well, they see it as a revenue stream for themselves.
But look, we work on certain kind of things as GE as well. I believe if you don't have a vendor-neutral approach, you will not be successful. Why? Because you have existing IT infrastructure. You cannot just exchange it. And that if there are two kind of approaches, one is monolithic, normally the EMR approach, hey, everything for me, or you have to pay for it. And there's a complete other let's say, way, best of breed. But I think that the truth will be in between somewhere, that you have companies that bring this, like the orchestration idea, bring it together and make it accessible vendor neutrally, because at the end, the demand of applications will be there. And it's the applications that pull the entire system up. And that's, if you completely have closed walls, there will also be a market for that, but it will be difficult.
I think, you know, in Scotland we have a national EMR, and we probably have perceptions on what we think of that. Certainly within our sphere in clinical engineering, we think it's very closed, and you know, it's noticeable that you don't, I think, have anyone. This is anyone, I don't know who they are. Here, who's from an IT department in Scotland. Brian and I and Steve, we're in medical technology, clinical engineering. Kate's in a sort of a radiology procurement realm. The IT people aren't in the room.
This should be the first step to change. No, it is, and early on. I mean, it's not just. I think the earlier you involve, by the way, even if you take the clinical side, is any clinician in here as well? Yeah, I mean, if I ask you, you likely think first in your clinical expertise, and the kind of interactions between other departments is there, but I'm pretty sure that it could be improved, right? That's the first step, that you look at behind this fence, and then the next fence is all of the supporting functions, because let's say the core business of a hospital is curing patients. So, and that's where, if you bring them all together early on, the thought of the accelerator as well. Normally, look, it's not a perfect solution. I'm aware of that, but this are steps where, within my 12 years now in GE, I see that also we opened up a lot to do that in a more collaborative approach.
How are you designing these things into your more traditional equipment? And Mark probably knows what I'm going to say here, because I'm going to talk about, so Forth Valley, we're about to go live with chat, with GE patient monitors, GE anaesthetic machines, and yet you don't have an anaesthetic machine that you can actually hang a computer screen off, and we're having to come up with solutions as to how to actually mount all the network and connectivity things, so it's really untidy. So this stuff's really good, but I'd like to see a bit more thought put into the actual design of your traditional equipment to make that a much neater solution. It feels a bit like a cobbled up solution, and we were expecting something a bit more polished given we are entirely GE equipment. I kind of expect if I'm using a Draeger anaesthetic machine and a Philips monitor and we're trying to connect it to CHA that is a bit clunkier, having all GE, I almost just expect to plug the network cable in.
And that's not the case.
Instead of having several boxes hanging off the back, us taking the risk of, actually I need to mount a computer on the anaesthetic machine, and GE won't certify it, so we're taking the risk to mount that. So these things are really good, but I think you need to still pay a bit more attention maybe to your traditional equipment and how that all speaks as well. Is that unfair, Mark? Mark's been through the pain.
No, it's fair feedback. I mean, and this is not just in this example. I think, look, yeah, for sure there are also interfaces in our own equipment where we have to work on, for sure. And that's
but it's true that, you know, from time to time we might be perceived like multiple companies within GE.
It does feel a bit like that. So
we tend to converge, you know, and to build this ecosystem where you know that you're in the GE ecosystem and not having those kind of Christmas trees that we have sometimes. So completely relate to that.
But
we are working.
Trying to make it more. I mean, we haven't, but yeah, it's a fair point.
But so it's not old equipment. It's brand new monitors, brand new anaesthetic machines, and you don't actually have a solution on your own equipment to mount your own network and stuff, which is a bit disappointing.
But equally, you'll never be a vendor for everything.
Yeah.
And you're always going to have integrations with other vendor systems, and the elephant in the room is interoperability.
Yeah, it is.
Standards.
And there's also one thing which I believe there's also a big change happening is this kind of I have to do it on my own. I have to develop everything on my own to have control. I always, that's the beauty of the business line I'm in. It's across all of the modalities and departments. So whenever we have discussions with our own development, there's also the kind of thing, but we can do that. The question is how fast, how good, and so forth. And if you then see the normal mobile phone world, if you are Google, you have every intent to also be on an Apple phone. And you compete with your internal, with your own premises because, yes, you are Android, but the app at the end pulls your entire platform. It does, you have to be interoperable. You cannot say, hey, I just do this on my own. Same with Chat GPT. In the future, you want to have this kind of technology available on every platform where you could be part of. And that's, I think, also a shift which is newer to our sector. You have to work with what I call frenemies and also on, and you want to be at the end in various, without exclusivity many times. But it's not addressing what you said. So there is still
I think it's just a bit about when you're designing your anaesthetic machines, you need to think about all the other things. So there's a bit of, let's say it's the 650 and 750 anaesthetic machines, brand new, don't have a solution to what is an existing product, an existing GE product actually. So we're coming up and manufacturing our own brackets and things to mount it to try and make it a bit tidier. So I think it works, and Mark's given us an awful lot of help to try and get there, don't get me wrong, but it's just that this is all good, but I think you could really, don't take your eye off the ball of the kind of more traditional
I think the right answer to that is look at what Microsoft did with Skype. They bought it and everyone thought that was the worst mistake ever. What they've done is they let Skype working, and behind it they create Microsoft Teams, which is basically at least my life or our life. So it's starting, you get something and then you have to rebuild from scratch to create a platform. So definitely, I mean, we hear you and we are referring to a higher level because actually it's the expectation from everyone. So it's just the merging platform takes a bit of time.
Okay.
Good. Thanks for your time.